Valtteri Bottas, second win of the year. Title contender now. New deal and inevitability with Mercedes. What do we reckon?
Well, nothing's inevitable, but who would replace him? Who would do a better job?
There's
two different questions.
There's a few drivers on the market, aren't there?
Maybe I should do a Christian Horner and ask my own question and then answer it in my sentence.
Well,
so
let's ease back a little bit from the question and say what we know Mercedes want from a driver. They want a driver who fits in well. Bottas seems to. A driver who can win on the days when Hamilton doesn't. Check, he's taken points off Vettel in that race by beating him. And a driver who can score big points for the Constructors' Championship and also be close enough to be in contention for the championship in his own right.
And apolitical as well, not a destabilising factor within, not so much the team, but with the dynamic with Lewis, who is that kind of person that has to be managed and preserved and kept pointed in the right direction.
I think Damon Hill made a very interesting point at the weekend. He made an observation about Valtteri along the lines of he has a very deep, quiet pride and conviction, and he himself feels that this is his biggest chance, which it obviously is, and therefore will do everything he can to deliver on the opportunities that he has been given. And I think that's a really astute observation. I'd expect no less from Damon, who's a very, very smart bloke, as we all know. But I think Valtteri, without being overtly political, as you mentioned, or without being a destabilising factor, would very happily go out and eat Lewis Hamilton's lunch if he could do so without actively destabilising Lewis. And I think he's kind of doing that.
Jenson Button used to be quite good at doing that, didn't he? A few little set-up directions that took Lewis by surprise, and just little bits and pieces, nothing overtly wrong, but just kind of keeping him on his toes.
Yeah, you don't get to be a race-winning Grand Prix driver in the best team in Formula One, or certainly one of the two best teams in Formula One, without having that kind of stuff about you. You know, past championship winner, proven himself at every level, and lo and behold, he's got the big chance, and he's proving himself. And that's because they're made of the right stuff.
I think the other thing with Bottas is he's also one of those drivers who had to kind of fight hard to get his opportunity. First, get into Formula One with Williams originally, which he did on merit. He didn't have monstrous backing behind him. He's done it on ability. And then once he was in at Williams, obviously there was a lot of buzz around him. Ferrari made a concerted effort to get him. They didn't meet the release clause figure. They couldn't come to an agreement with Williams. And I think Bottas knew last year that if he didn't get into somewhere different for 2017, he was in danger of just being stuck at a Williams-level team for good. And I think the fact that effectively he knew that maybe his best opportunity had passed him by, and then it's suddenly come back thanks to Rosberg's retirement. I think he's been close enough to that all is lost point to realise how valuable this opportunity is.
He has got a savvy management team around him. Didier Coton's been around, worked with Mika Häkkinen, overseen a lot of young drivers' careers, so he'll have been a word in the ear at the right time. But there is a sort of a myth that Bottas has had silver spoon treatment just because he's been able to work with high-profile people, but everything he's achieved has been on merit. He's never had better equipment.
And of course, when Bottas first got his opportunity with Williams, I think he did 15 FP1 sessions in 2012. Williams examined the kind of performance he was turning in on a green track, different fuel loads, programs, etc. And they reckon there was good evidence to suggest he was the quickest of their three drivers, quicker than the two race drivers, Pastor Maldonado, of course, who won a Grand Prix that year, and Bruno Senna. So even once he got that chance, he still had to do the job in the car to say, yeah, I can do this.
When he did get his chance, he had one of those little glimmers of talent that you see with the really good drivers. You know, Hulk did it with his pole back in 2010, and Valtteri qualified third, wasn't it, in Canada? In a very unfancied
and he was stunningly quick in Austin with low track temperatures, although he did blunder in Q3 and he underperformed in the end.
He scored his first points.
He did score points in that race, and
the team's only points that
and
little things like that. You think, okay, who's the guy who's delivering?
Exactly. Yeah.
There he is. You know, it's a very unstarry year, but the little glimmers that came were from him, and I think these things they mark drivers out. You know, those who can just whatever it is. You know, Alonso back in the day do you remember when he was coming through from F3000, he had that really dominant race at Spa, and he just drove into the distance. And these little things that mark someone out, and all the top drivers in some way they do something. Points on the debut, a brilliant wet weather drive, you know, unfancied finishing position, all these things. It's a mark of quality, I think.
He'll also have known that it's so important in the first half of the season to do something. And the first couple of races, first few weekends were a little bit up and down. I expected a little bit more from him. Not so much through being unrealistic, but because I think he's a very good driver. And I think he will have been looking at things and thinking, right, okay, I've got to kind of get to a nice firm level, and that Russia victory gave him that. So he ticked off the win and the pole in the first 4 races, and now he's been able to consistently score and haul himself into a position where he's not so far off the title contention. That was our starting point. The 2 questions were new contract and is he a title contender? So I think we all agree he's bound to get a new deal, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't see anyone else
he ticks all the
doing a
boxes.
better job.
You could argue that, say, a Fernando Alonso fundamentally is one of the all-time greats and could do a slightly better job, but he brings all sorts of baggage, and certainly the point that's being made about the way he worked with Hamilton, I think, would discount Alonso from contention there. So how about title contender? The points are Vettel 171, Hamilton 151, Bottas 136. So Bottas isn't too far off. So do we consider him to be a credible title contender, or is he mainly still a support act to Hamilton who'll just hang around if he can?
Another couple of weekends like this one, and he could quite easily cruise into being a genuine championship contender, and it goes to show that the fine margins.
We're almost at the midpoint of the season now, aren't we? What is it? There's a 20-point gap. So obviously it's totally recoverable, but there's no sign of weakness with that Ferrari or the Ferrari team, to be fair. And if they do push even harder and coalesce even more explicitly around Vettel, then a one-man championship charge is arguably the thing that is going to have to be done to win this title. And that, I think, is going to present difficult questions for Mercedes, because they're never going to, unless it's a Schumacher breaks his leg scenario and you have to get behind your Eddie Irvine, there's no way that Mercedes will get behind Bottas in that way with Hamilton fully fit and functioning. So at some point, I think they're going to have to ask Valtteri to support Lewis, if they want to win a driver's title.
I think that's very, very likely. I mean, it could be that if Bottas has a good run of races, keeps beating him, then you will change it round. Yeah. But I think there's probably still that feeling that overall Hamilton is the better all-round package at this stage. But Bottas has still got more room for improvement. So
I don't want to be in a PK and Mansell scenario where a third party wafts in, or even a Hamilton and Alonso situation where a third party wafts in at the final race and snatches your dinner off the table, to use your earlier metaphor.
I've got a sneaky feeling that the running order or the championship order that we're looking at now, Vettel, Hamilton, Bottas, may very well be the way we end up at the
very, very
end
possible.
Of the year. Vettel, I think I've just got a feeling that Vettel's going to pull it together this year, because Ferrari are showing themselves to be very unflaky